Well, hello, first time 5K podcast listeners. We are here today with Dr. Zimmermann. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes. And I want to talk about what you're doing because it is fascinating and very interesting. And I think our listeners will get a lot of value out of what you do.
I hope so.
Yeah. And sometimes we go into different topics that have nothing to do with running. And then sometimes it's all about running. Today, I think it's a little bit of both. And this topic is really important work, but it's also, to me, very interesting. So you're a primary care provider. That's where
Yes.
you started your career, right? And you left that.
Yeah, just recently, back in the spring, I was a primary care doctor at UW Health for about 12 years, and then I've left that to focus on my current project now.
And that current project, I want to talk about this and tie this into how this could be benefiting or also be important for runners, or runners want to try it out, or why do you do it in general? You have a business that focuses on
Fasting, primarily. It's weight loss and type 2 diabetes management. Fasting is the focus, but like the broader idea is just health. And in the big picture, we want to be helping everyone do every healthy thing, eating the healthiest foods that they can find, moving their bodies in healthy ways, and certainly running can be a big part of that. Even just walking, if someone, wants to just start moving, they don't know where to start, just start walking and ease their way into it. And then fasting, has not really been seen historically as like a common health practice in our society. And so that is a very interesting space to dive into, because it turns out there's really some amazing physiology and benefits that can happen in the fasting state to give the body a rest and a reset and experience some rejuvenation on the cellular level. And so I like to help people experience that and try to get those health benefits.
And you quit your job being a doctor to do this, to help people. So tell me and the listeners, why did you do that? And then how does fasting work? Mm-hmm. How do you do fasting? And you're a runner too. You just did like a full marathon with your son.
Yes, I did.
Here in Madison.
Madison Marathon. It was really a good experience.
And you do regular fasting, and you don't have type 2 diabetes.
No, there's different amounts and different lengths and types of fasting practices that different people might do for different reasons. So in my consulting work, I am helping people a lot to lose weight and control blood sugar. So our body stores energy for us. Runners might be dialing in on our glycogen reserves. If someone is getting ready for a race, they're talk about carb loading and making sure our glycogen is stored up. So our liver and muscles can store a carbohydrate reserve for us. And then we're familiar that we store body fat. And, some people out there trying to run and exercise and try to burn off that extra energy. So fasting is a totally different approach to try to get at those energy stores. Our body will be running off food energy when we're eating it, and the body is storing up that energy. You think back into our past before convenience stores and, what life might have been like for some of our ancestors. There isn't just food available all the time. The human system is a survival machine. It is designed to be able to handle periods without food. And so we open up gently, voluntarily, some fasting space, and we can give our body access to that stored energy. And some of the first stuff that it burns, the blood sugar and then the glycogen, that's why it can be so powerful for helping people with diabetes, because there the blood sugar's too high, and that sugar's just waiting for a space to be used.
So maybe talk about how people can get into fasting, and how do you help people get into fasting, and what the benefits are.
Yeah, and you are asking too about some of the practices that I've done. Maybe to start with, I'll tell you, I first saw a patient in my practice benefit from fasting somewhere is maybe back 2015, 2016. Someone who has type 2 diabetes, actually the most interesting case to me is someone who's taking insulin. So that's kind of one of the most difficult places with type 2 diabetes. And then in medicine, people will have to fast, for example, for a medical procedure. A colonoscopy would be a classic example. You got to do all that prep and you can't eat. And so when someone is taking a lot of diabetes medicines and insulin, they have to fast. You have to cut out the medicines. Otherwise, it can drive their blood sugar too low. So I had a patient who is on extremely high doses of insulin, the most I'd ever seen, and they had to go in for a colonoscopy, and the GI doctor was like, I don't think we can do this. How are we going to handle all this insulin? And so we talked with a lot of endocrinologists and tried to read the literature, and nobody knew exactly what to do. We said, let's err on the side of caution and just scale it, way back more than we normally would. And we cut like 90% of the insulin out. They went in for the colonoscopy, and their blood sugar still went too low. And everyone's like, wow. And I had such an interesting experience when that patient came back to the clinic. And, I don't know how this all works, but the patient before I saw that patient was this woman, very traditional Hindu practice where they practice fasting. And I'd never met someone like this. And she's just telling me, like, oh, this is just what I do. I'm like, oh, I don't think I would like that, Just don't eat for a whole day once a week was her practice. And I was like,
wow,
I don't think I would ever do that. She's like, no, you can learn to do it. And so I was like thinking about this from that patient. And then I went to talk to this other guy. I was like, sorry about the whole blood sugar crashing with the colonoscopy, but like this woman like fasts every week and she's super healthy. And like you just did this one day of fasting and you didn't even need any of the blood sugar drugs that you're taking. Like, would you consider just doing that as a practice and just take a holiday? And I wouldn't think that it would turn into anything else, but he's like, oh, I'll try that, because he's giving himself like 6 injections a day. And so the first time he did it, his blood sugar stayed normal the whole day with no medicine. And what we kept seeing quickly over the coming weeks, his blood sugar was getting better all the rest of the days. And over 6 months, he got completely off insulin. And so that's when I started dialing in and offering it to other people. And this is the thing that really inspired me to, break off and just offer this as a service to people, because it does take a fair amount of time. It's to support someone through that, but it's just such a powerful, amazing transition that I just wanted to be able to provide that service.
And lifestyle change as well.
Yeah. So, in that sort of space, I'm focusing on helping people overhaul their diet, try to help it be as healthy as possible, helping people get active and do every good thing. But the fasting is the thing that is so interesting to me because, to the extent that fasting, so-called intermittent fasting is out in society now, people with type 2 diabetes are pretty much always counseled against it because you run into complexity when people are taking medications because those medications can drive the blood sugar too low. And so anyone who is listening who has type 2 diabetes, I'm certainly not telling anyone just to go off and do it. You need to work with a thoughtful provider who can understand these medicines, help walk you through it. Now, the thing that is good about it is that every doctor who prescribes medicines for type 2 diabetes has protocols to manage those fasting times, like someone has a medical procedure. And this is how I encourage people to introduce it when they're trying to bring it up with their medical team. Just say, well, how would you handle a practice like this if I was having a medical procedure? And then that process can be adapted for any day where you're trying to practice it. Now, when I'm introducing these things to people now, I don't start any longer having people do a whole day fasting. Like, that's just how I first encountered it. Now, I just have people slowly, thoughtfully open up little bits of space. Like, if someone is opening up 12 hours normally where they aren't eating overnight, maybe they're just pushing their breakfast out and trying to get another couple hours in the day and then slowly build up their tolerance for it over time.
Mm-hmm. Besides what you're getting into with your type 2 diabetes patients, how does a normal, like not normal, but how does a person without that disease benefit from fasting?
Yeah, so if people want to dive in and do a little research, you could type in on your own into Google about autophagy. So autophagy, it's such a strange word, but the root of it means like self-eating. And there are these autophagy pathways in the body that basically can be described as cellular cleansing and recycling protocols. So people understand, okay, if we're not eating for a while, the body is trying to draw that energy out of the reserves. We think, okay, burning down body fat. We think of that. But there's all these other processes that happen. Like if you look under a microscope at a cell in the body, it's kind of like a little city. There's like data centers and power plants and factories and all these things. The factories are making the proteins that run our body. Somehow, the cell is able to know how old are all these little parts in the cell and are they working properly or not. And it's somewhere out after 16 to 18 hours without food, as the body is flipping over hormonally into this fasting state. The body will turn on these recycling pathways. They'll take the oldest parts of the cell and they'll actually just break them down and replace them with new parts of the cell, the ribosomes, all these structures. And there is definitely medical literature looking at, for example, the ability of these autophagy pathways to break down misfolded proteins or proteins that are accumulating, and it's felt that these can be neuroprotective, just as one example. So as we're developing, amyloid and all these dysfunctional proteins that may be at the roots of dementia, other sorts of things. That'd just be one example. Someone not trying to lose weight, but can you open up from time to time a fasting space, get this neuroprotective effect, get some of the resetting of our metabolism and decreasing insulin resistance, things like that.
How many hours do you need to fast in order to get these benefits, in your opinion?
So the autophagy effect, it here is kind of an interface with running, right? The more active you are, the healthier you're eating, the less time it takes to get into these sort of effects. Like if you just read a standard article, let's say on average, maybe the average is around 18 hours when you start getting that effect, and then it does really ramp up, out past 24 hours. But I always tell people, don't be discouraged by that. Like just try to get little bits of it. Don't push yourself any harder than you want to. I always tell people you should feel good about doing it. It's like when you're doing it, you should feel just positive, lighter, just good energy. If you're feeling like overwhelmingly hungry or stressed, I always tell people, okay, you don't have to push that. Like go as far as you can tolerate, and then you can always, have a plan B or just stop at that point. I look at it a lot like weight training. Like if you've never lifted weights before, like you never practiced fasting before, you don't just go into the gym and start, throw 3 plates on the thing, you'll hurt yourself. So it's like start with the little weights and lift it and ramp yourself up slowly. Fasting can be like that.
What can you consume while you're fasting?
So staying hydrated, I usually say an artificial sweetener, calorie-free beverage. So try to have, water be perfect, maybe like a twist of lemon in it or something, or a coffee or a tea, something like that, but not soda and juice and these sort of things, if you're trying to get that autophagy effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it. Just water, coffee, teas.
Sparkling water, but that's pretty much it. Anytime you start adding things to it, like cream and sugar in the coffee, it's not that you can't lose weight doing that. It's not that, you have your cream and sugar in a coffee. It's like a tiny, itty-bitty little breakfast, in there. It's not that couldn't work for someone. It's not the pure fasting state.
Right.
And so the advice that I give to people where that you're completely dialing in on the process, just keep it calorie-free. And then, I'm never a perfectionist, or I try not to be. I say, well, do the best you can. See if things are working. Is the process serving you? You don't have to have it more intense than you want. But like with the interface with running, if you're running a lot and you're naturally burning through your glycogen reserves and you're attacking your insulin resistance from a whole different side of the equation, it might not take you 18 or 20 hours to get into that space. It might take you less, 16, 14 even. So
when do I know I'm in that space?
You can't measure it. It's not like you can go get a blood test and say, oh, your autophagy level is this. Like there's nothing like that. But
how do I feel?
This is the question that you can answer. It's more abstract. How do you feel? And as we think about running, when I was learning about this, and then you could go on YouTube, for example, and look up fasting exercise, right? And there's a whole community of people doing all kinds of fasting training. But you really have to ease into that. And I like the saying, everyone's familiar with the saying, right? You have to walk before you can run. But if you are in a fasting space, I would say you also have to be able to sit before you can walk. So I always tell people, like, can you just tolerate a fasting interval and feel good without exercising before you like try to, go out and exercise? And some of this depends on your overall fitness level and things too. Someone who's totally inactive and never practiced fasting would be a very poor choice to try to do both at the same time. You want to ease into these things. Because if the body's not used to it, what theoretically could go wrong? A fasting space, just like exercise, it can lower blood pressure, can lower blood sugar, can do both at the same time. Someone could feel dizzy, weak, lightheaded. In a worst case scenario, could someone pass out? It could happen. Not likely. You're likely to sit down beforehand, but you want to stay far away from anything like that. So
what do I do if those things happen?
Obviously stay. If you're going to pass out, of course, you're going to sit down, you're going to deep breath, all these sort of things. You stay hydrated and just take a break. But that's why I have everybody.
And then start eating again.
Yeah, get something to eat, absolutely. So you can ease your way into this, though. In that state, though, is a powerful metabolic state in the body. If you're trying to burn through blood sugar, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to just get this cleansing effect happening, you start running, we're so used to running these systems, especially, runners. You look through all the races, everybody's hitting gels all the time, try to keep the energy flowing. That's just one side of the system. You can train the other side of the system, which is how optimized is your body at burning the stored energy that is within you. And if you haven't practiced doing that, it can be very difficult. But as you open up that space, the body is saying like, oh, we've got some plans, to handle this. We can do this. And as you train it over time, the first time, I think it was in the winter when I learned about this, and I was like doing sprint intervals on my bike, in the morning usually, and on my trainer in the basement. And the first time I was like, I usually, I'd eat a banana, I'd drink a juice, I'd get us. And the first time I tried to do this on my bike, I could like hardly go. I was like, and I felt like lightheaded. But 6 weeks, it took about, for me, by 6 weeks, I could exercise much harder in a fasting state than I could, without it. And now I run a half marathon fasting when I get up. And, there is some literature looking at, it might not be the optimal way to like get your absolute PR to do it fasting. Like the glucose is going to give you a little more torque and horsepower, but it's just totally fascinating as like a human experience to actually do it.
That you can do this.
Say, you can train yourself to do it and feel good. That was pretty interesting experience.
But fasting is great to do weight management, plus also for your type 2 diabetes patients.
Yeah, and so
let's finish with those type of, like, if I'm an athlete and I want to do it in a fasting stage, is one thing.
Yeah.
But I want to try fasting. I've never tried it before on a lengthy period like you were just describing, like 24 hours or even 18 hours. I've done like breakfast to dinner, but I find that pretty hard, especially when you don't take your time to dial it back, so to speak, right? I tried it once and still tried to do all the things. And I was new to that. So maybe it's good to start or to try it and to clear your calendar a little bit more.
Yeah.
And stay where it's safe, like at home, or take a day of like a break, or like a day of off work, or work from home.
Yeah. People will have different perspectives on it, and I would say that'd be like your easiest way to start, just so you know what it's going to be like. I always tell people, have a plan B. People often find it easier to do actually if they're going to work, as long as you know that you're not going to feel terrible. Maybe start on a weekend day and give yourself a couple hours and see that you're okay. Because most people find if you can stay busy, that's what makes it easier. if you like the absolute probably worst place to try to fast is like just stay at home and clean your kitchen and just you're hanging around the fridge all the time and the food is always right there. It's going to be very hard. You're always going to be thinking about it. But if you stay busy, like maybe some people have had this, like have you ever been super busy at work and so many things going on and like you were going to eat lunch, but like all of a sudden it's 3:00 and you're like, what happened? You know, sometimes people are like, oh, like the hours passed and you didn't even think about it.
But then you dip into the wrong foods. Oftentimes.
Well, you want to create the environment for your success. So keeping wrong foods, like lots of highly processed stuff and candy and chips and stuff, I would often have people focus on trying to clear that stuff out first before trying to dive in on a lot of fasting. You know, I say
it makes sense.
The healthy food, like sometimes people argue me, like, isn't it more important like to eat healthy food than to practice fasting? I wouldn't argue about that. I was like, I mean, healthy nutrition, solid food is like probably the most important health decision we make. So often I'm trying to help people optimize that. And someone say, well, what if someone completely optimized their diet and they didn't need to do any fasting? I'd be like, well, I'd be totally fine. Like that'd be a win. There's probably still some space for it, you know, even if you don't need to lose weight from time to have this cleansing sort of effect. Like when I learned about fasting, I had put on, I don't know, 35, 40 pounds during my residency. I had a lot of space there where I could fast, and I lost that weight. Now, between all the running and doing fasting, now I don't need to lose any weight. So I do it only occasionally now, personally, because I don't want to lose any weight. So you have to balance it. But I feel better doing it. I feel mental clarity. I feel that it is helpful for the GI system. I like the effect. So a couple times in a month, I'll do that for that effect. But then, to be honest, you got to eat a lot if you're going to run a marathon. So then I will just eat some bigger meals after it to kind of balance it out.
Yeah. And then to finish up, so you are more focusing right now on the type 2 diabetes patients?
Yeah. Anyone who needs to lose weight. And then like my idea for that, like we want to prevent people from getting type 2 diabetes. I mean, in our society right now, rates of type 2 diabetes are exploding. It's heading down even to kids getting type 2 diabetes, which never used to be the case. So anything we can do to help people keep from having that happen, I want. And if you're normalizing your weight, if you're overweight, here's a process that can help you do that. That's one side of it. And then anyone who has type 2 diabetes, like I told the story at the beginning, I've helped a lot of people get off insulin. I ran a fascinating clinical study while I was at UW where we took a group of 20 insulin-using patients and put them on the fasting protocol for 6 months. And then amazingly, 19 out of 20 people finished our study. They fasted for 6 months on 18 hours fasting per day. And then 14 out of those 19 completely off insulin by the end of the study without raising their blood sugar. So we had some really good results. I really want to help people do that. So
wow.
Happy to spend my time doing that.
That's huge.
Yeah, I do think it'll be fun to have a broader, discussion of get that out into the mainstream, that it actually can be done, because people just don't know that it can be done safely. That's what we showed in the study. And so simplefasting.com is my website. I've got an online community there where people can connect in with other people who are trying to do that, and I'm doing some live streaming to that group privately there. And then I have some personal consulting that I'm doing.
Very cool.
That people can see there. And I'm on a YouTube channel, so if people don't want to, need to buy services, Simple Fasting on YouTube, you can link in through the website. And I'm doing some live streaming there and trying to make the best free educational content about it that I can.
Yeah, I think it's just cool to see that this is a avenue that people with type 2 diabetes can take.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about it. And I want to try fasting just to see if I can do it. Like, I've never done fasting.
Yeah.
I have done dieting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where a cleansing, let me say that, like where you do just juices or just greens,
Yeah.
but nothing else. But then it's longer for like 3 or 4 days. I've done that.
Yeah.
But I've never not eaten or drank anything that has calories
Yeah.
in my life.
The most common situation where someone runs into, someone has something bad happen. They get a flat tire, they get stranded somewhere, they're prevented from eating. And you say, well, that is a very stressful experience. And then that feeling of being hungry can feel, especially in the midst of another stress, as such an unpleasant experience. But when you take yourself out of, someone there would say, oh, I'm going to make sure that never happens again. Okay, but when you approach fasting as completely voluntarily and you plan for it and you take all the stressful parts out of it, and then you get into that space, it can actually just be a very calm, thoughtful, positive space. And that's the only way that I ever tell anyone to do it, that you should be feeling calm and just telling yourself this is like a health practice. I'm like feeling better. Think of like all the work I'm not having to do. Less shopping, less cooking, less dishes, less this stuff. I'm just going to give my body this space. And as long as you can stay in that space and feeling good, then I say go with it. Then there's no stress. And if you're getting to a point where you say, oh, I think this is not, I'm starting to feel too hungry. I'm starting to feel stressed. You can always just stop and then see, maybe keep a little journal. How did you feel? And then try again a different day. And then you could kind of see how do you adapt and develop in this practice over time.
And do you recommend patients that come to you that have type 2 diabetes or overweight patients, should they consult their doctors first?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I always say that. Have a good relationship. I think, I spent 12 years as a primary care doctor. I'd always want to know, what are my patients doing? And that's especially true. People all over the world practice fasting for religious or spiritual reasons, Ramadan or Lent or like all these different holidays, and people don't consult with their doctor about it. So it's not that you have to do it, but many people who are doing this aren't taking medications, and so it becomes especially imperative if you have medications that need to be taken with food, blood sugar, blood pressure medicines. Always have a thoughtful conversation with your medical team about it.
And then maybe I shouldn't dip into this, but I'm doing it anyway.
That's all right.
What is if I want to try this because I think I'm interested and it could help me and I could benefit from it, and maybe I can lower my medication and I can lower my weight and I have a healthy life. What is if a doctor of that person contradict in their opinions, like, no, it's not healthy. You need to stay on this medication. You are this is your pathway now.
I wrote an article about this exact situation on simplefasting.com. So go simplefasting.com, hit articles. Working with a primary care provider is an article when you scroll down. And I would just encourage people to have a lot of patience, relationships are the core of medicine and healthcare. You want to have a good relationship with medical providers. If I can help someone in that scenario, they maybe just have an open mind that the doctor really is right. I have, a video on all the reasons to avoid fasting. I try to put it out. Is the medical provider actually having thoughtful reasons? And, anytime if you learn about something new, you say, you get so excited to dive right in, but never rush anything with the fasting. Have a thoughtful conversation with the medical provider. And then see if the articles that I have on my site, I also have a medical provider resource where I'm outlining a lot of the, scholarly literature on it, because I've read hundreds of fasting studies for all of the research studies. Using that as a resource, doctors love to look at studies. And so if you can use some of those resources as a way to present that to a doctor, help to educate them about some of the scientific literature on it, and maybe take some of the pressure off yourself. Maybe I can take some of that pressure, say, hey, look, like here is this doctor, watch some of his videos. I really enjoy talking about this stuff, especially with other doctors. And so, if you're having difficulty communicating, I always, send them my way, tell them to send me an email, and I always be happy to chat. I mean, I'm very interested in providing education about this practice to people in the medical community. I have lots of doctors who are using resources that I've made already to help people, and I want that to be able to expand. And I think in the big picture, we have a metabolic health crisis in our country. Here is a practice that can be cleansing and rejuvenating to the metabolism.
Right, and medication cannot always be the answer for everything.
And, I had a very interesting conversation last week with a gentleman who is very high up in an insurance company. And, their insurance company is suffering because of all the costs of weight loss medicines these days are so expensive. And I just think, we have a natural practice that's completely free that probably could help people to a similar, if not greater degree. And let's just help people to realize the potential of this. And I think the potential both for our society, our health system, and our individual selves could function much better if we keyed in on some of these kind of core basic human functions. And that's how I try to stay optimistic about the future of healthcare.
Great. Well, on this note, I think we're going to wrap it up today. And thank you so much for taking the time to talking about this. I want to talk to you about it after, offline, how to get my first 12-hour fasting day under my belt. I'm excited to try it. And listeners, first time 5K, thank you, Dr. Zimmermann, for being here today.
Thank you so much.